Hi there, welcome to Tea Toast and Marmalade. I usually start out my podcast with a slight discussion on tea. And here is today's. Did you know that Hickory Farms makes tea? If your answer was no, then I am with you, neither did I. I received a Hickory Farms package as a gift, and I was quite surprised and delighted that it didn't contain the usual cheeses and crackers, although I am very partial to those as well. The package of tea sat for a while, and then one day I was looking over at it and I thought, why not? I'll give it a try. And you know what? It is not bad at all. And for those who like to delve into herbal teas, you can check around and see if Hickory Farms has any close by you. My favorites are still jasmine and rosehip. However, behind the scenes, I am becoming more and more open to adding new flavors to my favorites. Okay, enough about me and my tea tasting, and on to the podcast. I'm not sure if you remember my first podcast. If you don't, it doesn't matter. I made the statement that I wanted these podcasts to be real. I'm not in this to make money, because I certainly haven't, and I have no fame. I choose to do these podcasts because my personal journey through life hasn't been that easy. So if sharing with you what I have learned along my journey and the lessons that I have learned helps you even a tiny bit, then doing these podcasts in my spare time has been worth it. Over the last few years, and most recently the last few months, I have tried to process the life lesson of grieving and loss. Grief due to loss is a very difficult thing to process because it is something that takes all the time it needs, and it is very, very personal. If we cannot avoid encountering loss and grief during our lifespan, I feel then that it is worthy of attention and practical understanding. We humans are emotional creatures, and we cannot avoid feeling what the world throws at us. We are not that apt at shutting off every deep and devastating emotion, and we cannot avoid the heartaches of life. Most of us are sponges, wide open pores that absorb literally everything that goes on around us. We are sympathetic, we are empathetic. We feel the pain of others, and we feel the pain within us. We cry at movies because we emotionally invest in the plot and the characters. The books we read revolt against our emotional psyche. We are investors, all of us. We invest in family, friends, lovers, co-workers. We invest in food, travel, education. And even those who do crafts invest their time and creativity. You get the picture. It is our human makeup to be investors. So is it any wonder that we feel so deeply and struggle so much when a loss happens in our life? If we cry over a movie, how much more will we feel to a real life situation that hits home? The truth is, loss is inevitable. At some point along our journey, we will encounter it. Having lost my father, my mother, and my 14-year-old dog over the last few years, I found myself in a struggle that I really did not understand. I didn't understand it because it hadn't happened before the first time. I had no idea what to do with my investment, my invested emotions, I should say, and my memories. I also had no idea that there was an unspoken grieving that goes on inside me that was not making itself evident. Loss can be heart-wrenching, life-changing, and personally devastating. And you know what? That is okay. To be gutted, it is okay. It is okay to feel broken, and it is okay to weep for others and to weep for ourselves. What I noticed for myself was that loss can come in many forms, not just in the definition of death. During one of my true grieving moments, I remember thinking about other things and situations in life where loss had hit me and hit me hard. Times where a true emotional response of grief overwhelmed me. I don't know if what I can share here will help you at all, but after the last few years of facing loss and grief, I began to have a strange understanding of myself and how I process. So if these notes help you, then I'm truly happy for that. The biggest thing that I learned over the years is that loss isn't just a death. Whatever we lose, we have lost, and grief can be felt in every loss. And please remember, I'm not an expert on grief or loss. I am just someone who has experienced it and helped others through it. So here are a few things that I have learned about grief and loss on my journey, and I hope they help you. First and foremost, loss is intricately personal. Not even the closest person to you can feel what you feel. Even if your entire family experiences the same loss as you, the grief can only ever be individual. This is one of the first lessons that I learned. My loss was my loss. It is a grave mistake, in my opinion, to expect each family member to feel and react the same way. We cannot all go in together, and we cannot all come out together. If each person in one family unit has the exact same phone, do you think they would also have all the exact same apps and all the exact same settings? All the exact same ringtones and notifications? No, they would not. We are unique in our needs. Now, this phone analogy may help you, and it did help me. It may help someone that you know who feels pressured to move and feel as others do during a time of loss. And if this is you, try to wrap your head around the phone idea and allow yourself to use your own settings. Ignore the pressures of others if you can. Ignore those who want you to feel what they feel. Ignore those that want you to respond as they respond. You are allowed to grieve at your own pace and in your own way. I have heard it said that you can only grieve for those that you are very close to, as if being close to someone was a right or a privilege, and that your depth of grief should equal the depth of your relationship. I beg to differ. A loss is a loss. If there was a person or a thing that filled a space in your life and suddenly that space is made empty, you are definitely going to feel that emptiness. Your emotional reaction to the emptiness determines the degree of loss, not some definition of closeness. I hope if you have experienced loss, you are allowed to grieve in your own time and in your own way. There are more ways to feel the impact of loss other than strictly the death of someone close. Here are some that I have noticed either in my own life or in the lives of those that are part of my life. Loss is not only death. There are many things that we can lose in our lives, and all loss can cause us to grieve. If it even leaves a void, that is. Our depth of grieving cannot be predetermined. What about losing a friend or an acquaintance? Some of you have felt this loss. Even an acquaintance who took up a spot in your life, and you may or may not notice the void. Sometimes with acquaintances, we feel some guilt for not being closer than we actually were, but we still feel for their families because we know them. The truth is, we cannot know how the loss of an acquaintance will affect us until that space is made empty. Only then can we acknowledge a void, and only then can the void define our loss. Even having a friend move miles away leaves us with the reality of a loss in our lives, and we could grieve that loss for a long time. So do not dismiss the grieving process that is underway when these losses happen to you. Now, there is loss of hope. I learned this one just last year, and truly it is very real loss, and you will grieve it as you would a death. In my situation, I'm trying not to choke up here. In my situation, I was not very close to my mother. So when she passed away last year in 2019, I didn't exactly grieve the loss of her placement in my life, but rather I grieved the loss of hope. You see, she raised my brother and my sister in a close-knit, tight-knit setting. I, on the other hand, was sent away to boarding school where I lived. I was there from the ages of 7 until my very early teens. As a result of being sent away, I became quite distant. I knew how to visit. I was really good at visiting because that's all I knew. I became an outsider, and blending was not easy. Because my mother did not raise me, there was always a void inside me. An empty, dark spot where, in a normal world, a loving, caring, nurturing mother existed. I felt the true lack of a mother deep inside me, and most, if not all my life, I secretly pined after what I could not have. The years did not bring healing to my abandonment or my rejection issues. It was news to me when she passed on that I had still hung on to hope, that one day I would have had that fairy tale mother that my brother and my sister had. Hope may not have been on my mind all the time, but it was definitely in my heart. When she finally passed away, my secret desire died with her, and all hope was lost. My sister and brother grieved the loss of her presence, while I grieved the loss of her absence. The loss of hope for dreams to come true died with her, and I grieved the loss of hope, the end of that little girl's dreams. So loss of hope is real, and it is quite devastating. You definitely do feel it. So let's move on here. And what about the loss of relationships? Again, this is a death. Now think about divorce. This is a huge death. And anybody who has traveled through divorce can tell you that grief is real and the loss is more than real. It takes time to recover from a divorce, and sometimes people don't fully recover at all. The nature of the divorce plays a huge role in the grieving and loss process. A tragic, sudden end is like just finding out someone died. Even a lengthy divorce can be tragic, violent, harsh, and life-changing. Processing the loss of a relationship can be equally as difficult as an actual loss of life. In fact, it is a loss of life and leaves us with the same agonizing results. So think about it just for a moment. We have just lost a person who occupied not only a space in our hearts, but in our homes, in our lives, in our dreams, in our goals. Loss doesn't get more real than that. And think of the big picture. Loss of hope, loss of those dreams that you planned together, loss of the friends that you shared, loss of family, loss of even animals, children, your home. You may lose your home. The loss of belongings and finances. Divorce is huge. And those enduring a divorce experience some of the same emotions as those who have suffered a death in a family. A lack of zest of life, for work, for activities, and an overall slump that involves isolation, withdrawal, loss of appetite, and just a pure lack of caring. Their world may as well pass them by while they struggle through their loss, and to them their world has ended. Many suffer deeply and grieve in reality for quite some time. And most of you know someone who has struggled through this loss and can attest to what I am saying here. Even if you yourself have struggled through, you know how devastating it can be. It is tragic. It rips a piece of our heart to places that we don't want to go. Anyway, moving on from divorce, let's look at this one. Loss of pets. Now, there are those people who may be rolling their eyes right about now, thinking, really? But it is true. To most pet owners, the pet was an ever-present, vital, integral part of their family. Animals fill a void, a space in our lives and become friends with our children. We get used to seeing them every single day, on the couch, out for a walk, on the rug, whatever your animal did. Well, we lost our dog recently, and it was not an easy journey. So my heart goes out to all those who have walked this journey as well. Our little companion of 14 long years went to sleep peacefully. We rescued him from a puppy mill when he was 5 months old, and so after all those years we had become such a huge presence in our lives, and there was a bond there even if we didn't recognize it. It was the most difficult decision this family had to make, one that was for the dog's quality of life and not for us. But selfishly, we hung on as long as we possibly could, and even though he finally is free from all the suffering, I still grieve uncontrollably on certain days. It was only 2 months ago this happened. This is where I learned a true and real lesson from loss, that it is so very personal. I know I said that earlier, but what I am saying here is that loss is not only something we feel individually, but it is literally all about us. I knew in my heart that my grief for myself was what I was grieving, because he was sleeping without struggle for the first time in years. That is the true aspect of grief. It is personal because it is also all about us, not the person or the pet that is gone. So our mourning, our loss, our grief is for us. If you look at the slideshow with this podcast, you will see a tribute to Monk. He was our Huckleberry Finn who traveled everywhere with us. So some of the pictures there are of him, and some of them are back roads and some of the roads that we traveled together. Monk was a little Affenpinscher, in case you're wondering. It has only been a couple of months, and I just said this, I'll say it again, I still burst into tears. So the process of loss and grief is still happening inside me. So when I think I heard his feet tapping along the kitchen floor, I have a tear or two in my eyes. 14 years is a very long time. It's a lot of memories, and we treasure them all as if we lost a piece of us. It was the end of an era in our family, really, and just like the loss of a family loved one, we felt it just the same. Some do not grieve so intensely over animals, and you know what? That is absolutely okay. they still may feel the void in their lives. I am an emotional sponge and have surrendered to the truth of that. There is nothing wrong with me, nor is there anything wrong with those who do not feel so intensely. It is all about our individual settings. And on this note, I ask that we all not judge each other's personal losses or sense of grieving. Let's not judge if they gravely feel the loss, and let's not judge if they don't feel it so much. Pain is personal. Let's be compassionate humans who embrace all of life in all its forms. Okay, next up here, loss of a job. I know you're probably thinking, how does this even get on there? But I have witnessed this, so I thought to put it on because you don't know what people go through. We see it from the outside, and most often people present to us precisely what they want us to see. And I have witnessed inside job loss. I thought about this, and because I have witnessed the loss in families, I figured, no, I'm going to put it on this list. And I know some people think it's not that big of a deal, but other people think it is real and devastating. The financial burden alone is a huge loss and causes unknown grief. It is also embarrassing to some, and to some more than they can cope with. The loss feels like a punch in the face, to be honest. And when our faces sting from that punch, we simply cannot see or think. So think about it just for a moment before you judge. The loss of a job forces change. It is change that is out of our control. And that in itself causes us to panic and feel anxiety. The future will seem hopeless. Financial loss is devastating and affects us on so many levels. It is life-altering, and whether we like it or not, there is grief taking place. Worry, stress, fear, hopelessness, and concern can be overwhelming, and even physical symptoms related to stress can begin to appear. The burden of a family may be on your shoulders. You may lose sleep because you cannot pay your bills. Many things that are similar to a divorce happen in a family when a job is lost. Hope seems useless. Dreams without your job, they seem to die. Doors just remain shut, and the entire family seems to feel the impact. Job loss is huge. It is life-altering, devastating. If you have lost your job, let me say this, that your grief and your concerns are real and your loss is real. So in the midst of your attempts to reestablish yourself, try to recognize that you may be grieving the loss of something huge and allow yourself to feel that. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone who will allow you to share what you're feeling and how you are processing what you're going through. There are groups and counselors willing to help you walk through the process. You're not alone. Others have survived job loss, and you can as well. But understand the fears and the concerns and the grief that hit you. It is justified. Now on the next one, I have another one that people would say, really, it's on the list again? And I would say, really, yes, it is. And that is the loss of health. I mean, think about this. Having worked, well, for me anyway, having worked in the community as a PSW and in palliative care, I actually can vouch for the sense of death that is delivered to a family through a tragic health event. I have known a couple of people in the past years who are close to me and have experienced the devastation of health loss. This is a life lesson that made me more aware of the value of health. Once it is lost, life changes and grief can quickly set in. Loss of health is impacting and personally devastating, and we know that. I don't have to keep saying it. I'm just pointing out how the people around me have felt. If we are going along as normal, then suddenly there is a change without warning, then obviously it's going to affect the entire family. Think about it. Some people are out there one day without warning, were suddenly struck by a stroke, heart attack, blindness, accidents, diagnosis. Life was normal 1 minute, and now it will never be normal again. When a child is hit by a car, and now the family is thrown into a whirlwind of caregiving, ambulances, surgeries, doctors, medicines. It is life-changing. Your partner is talking 1 minute and then they're clasping their chest as a heart attack attempts to destroy them. Maybe the test results are back and they are not good results and they are life-changing. This is important. Health is really important, and we don't understand how it can impact our lives when it deteriorates. There are only a few ways that our lives can change forever due to health. Health deterioration is actually a normal aging process, but traumatic news delivers a huge punch that takes away our breath and robs us of tomorrow's dreams and adventures. It is like a death to a family when tragic news arrives. It is out of our control. It is like the death of a loved one because you are watching that loved one who used to be very able and is no longer. A tragic health issue impacts all of the family and the extended families. We grieve for what once was, and it is real. These are only a few examples of loss that I came up with for this podcast, and I came up with these ones because these are the ones I've witnessed in my own life. You are welcome to share even more if you have. I have helped myself with the grief component of life by allowing myself to feel everything, by understanding the grieving process itself. I have also relieved myself of all expectations concerning my emotions and healing responses. I truly believe, that my feet will touch the ground precisely when they are ready to. I diagnose loss in this way. If something or someone was in my life and then leaves my life, but leaves me with an empty space, a void, or leaves me with destroyed dreams and hopes, then I conclude I've suffered a loss. What I have come to understand about loss and grieving is that the actual loss is only the top layer of the event. That's what just happened. That's the tragic event. The part that we don't always see is what is happening to us on the inside. Grief begins its own process immediately, regardless of whether or not we are aware of it. We can be preoccupied with all our emotions and all the events and all the things that we need to do. But we are on the inside grieving because it just begins. The minute we suffer, it begins. Grief, while devastating, really does have a process, and it is important to understand in all your life events that the grieving process lends itself to each and every version of loss that we encounter, not just the ones that take away life. When we understand this, wisdom allows healing to take place. This is the end of the first part of this podcast on grief and loss. There will be part 2 coming up. Until then, God bless you all.